All right, we're going to do two things today. First, we're going to go over in your book chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And you might say, well, that's a lot. That's 20 pages. Because a lot of the chapters are very short in here if you haven't noticed already. Then we're going to go over, I'm going to give you hard copies of the rest of those examples that I showed you the other day. All right, and we're going to go over and talk about that stuff. Then my hope is what we'll do on Wednesday of this week is we'll go over chapter 8, which is on navigation, chapter 9, which is on forms, and chapter 10, which is on modal. And that actually is quite a few more pages because the chapter on forms is pretty long. So that'll be about 50 pages. All right? We do not meet a week from today. You all know that now because it's Labor Day. All right? So if we can keep up with that, then ideally I might even be able to give you your first assignment by Wednesday. All right? And if you say, well, I don't want to work on any homework during break, then don't work on it during break, okay? It's fine with me. All right. So I'm on chapter 3, container and container fluid. Okay? If you take a look at the example they show on the bottom of page 20, and like I said, I'd love to show it to you, but I don't have a PDF of the book. There are two different divs in here. The first one has got the hello with the H1 tag, and it's got the first paragraph that says, watch as this site gets bigger. All right? Then there's another div underneath it that's got paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, and paragraph 4. Well, even though it just has got those names in there, if you look on page 21, there are actually paragraphs associated with it. All right? And what I want you to get out of that is what's shown in the middle of page 21. And that is you can have as many divs on a page that have a class of container, but you cannot nest them. And they mention that down towards the bottom of page 21. All right? And if you say, well, what happens if you do? Then try it. I don't know, because when I'm told not to do something, all right?
It just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's usually what happens is you're not going to get the output you think you're going to get.
Yeah, I figured that out the hard way.
You know, it's like when I was a little kid, my brother told me to run, literally he told me this, why don't you run again and bang your head against the wall as hard as you can and see what happens. Something told me that probably wasn't really what I wanted to do. And as I got older, I really didn't want to see what it would feel like. Why'd you do that? Because it feels so good when the pain goes away. I didn't need that. All right? All right. So they show you the examples, and they show you again what it'll look like on page 22. Nothing big there. Okay? But let's take a look at this next one that's right here. In fact, I'm just going to, so this is chapter 4. All right? So I'm on page 23. And we're going to open this up. And I want you all to realize this if you haven't already, if I haven't mentioned already. This thing, it shows much better on your screen than it does here. All right, that's a Jumbotron. It's the same kind of thing that we had, those of you who are in the ASP.NET class, when we went and we looked on the homepage in ASP.NET, when you don't do an empty website, when you do a pre-built site, you get the same kind of thing. All right? So all they've done is they've taken those 4 paragraphs they had before, and instead of having a title at the top with an H1 tag, which is what they had before, they still have an H1 tag. They still have a paragraph tag here, because if I view the source, all that's new right there, all right, all that we've added is the Jumbotron. So it's this. A Jumbotron is another type of container. All right? And you see exactly, by convention, you typically put an H1 tag in there and you put 1 or more paragraph tags in there. If you happen to put, make it real huge, it'll expand. All right, but that's not considered really good programming practice to do that. It should be something that looks more like this. In other words, it shouldn't have a whole boatload of stuff in it. Does that make sense? All right. And I didn't show you this, but again, from the first chapter that we just very quickly went over, all right, if you go under HTTP, the getbootstrap.com, If you go under the CSS tab, there's all sorts of stuff there about containers. All right? They talk about containers, and they talk about the grid and the 12 columns and everything else. All right? If you go out to the bootstrap.com and you go down to getting started, there's an example section there. And one of the examples has got Jumbotron in it. All right? And the only reason that I want to mention that and I want to show that to you, I'm going to grab this. Of course you wouldn't find it. All right, get bootstrap.com, and you've got to go down to, oh, what was it? Getting started. And if you go down to that and you keep going and you work your way down, eventually, keep going, there you go. They've got some examples. And if you use the Jumbotron, which is right there, that's almost identical to the one that you see when you start up a project in ASP.NET. All right. What's nice about this, again, is that these are basically, plug and play type of things. You grab all that code, you plug it into your website, and then you change it accordingly. All right. But, you've got a couple things here. So they've got an email and a password. So there's a little sign-in thing here. You can change whatever you want to change. These, you can make links someplace. Right now, they link nowhere. On the ASP.NET that we went over, they all do link someplace. All right. So the idea behind this particular chapter in the book is that you at least have a comfort level of what a Jumbotron looks like, and they show you that on 23, and then on 24 is the picture of it. And they mention on the very bottom of page 24, it says, what if you want to use different colors for the background and the text inside of the Jumbotron? Can we do that? Of course. It will be covered later in the chapter on light customization, page 111, so if you want to see that. All right? And I think I mentioned this to you before, but I'm saying it again. This is going to pertain whether this is your only class or whether you're in this class and you're in the PHP class, or whether you're in this class and the PHP class and the ASP.NET class. The idea is what you're going to start doing in here, and then you'll move it to the other two classes, is I'm making up something. We're going to have a mythical loan company. It'll be something like that. All right? And you will using Bootstrap, you'll create a main page. All right, it'll have a Jumbotron on it. It'll eventually have other stuff. You might not want a Jumbotron on your main page. Eventually, we'd like to put an image gallery out there, something like that. So as we get going, all right? And then you'll have an about page, a contact page, etc. And then you will take that and use that as your home page for creating that both in ASP.NET and creating that in PHP. All right, that'll minimize some of the work that you have to do, but yet you'll be able to compare and contrast using two different server-side programming languages, all right, and with the same software, all right. And believe it or not, it's not going to be that hard for you to do. But then the other thing I'm going to ask that you do for this class is that you pick something that you have an interest in, whatever it is, all right, as long as it's something you could show other people. All right. So if you've got a personal habit that no one should know about, then don't do it on that. All right. And Mike will do his. He'll have one, an all about Cody page. All right. Type of site, but you could do it whatever you wanted to. I mentioned before, if you've got a sports team you really like, or whatever you want to do it on. But the idea is you'll start working on that, and you'll put that into basically an entire site using Bootstrap. And what I'd like you to do is start to think about, well, you know what? Boy, there's a lot of stuff I could do. I mentioned Luke before because I remember when you were doing your site for the 157 class, you had some sports stuff, and maybe he's got something. Maybe he wants to set up his own, instead of DraftKings.com, something like that. But something where eventually you could even add the equivalent of some e-commerce or something like that. And I'd like you to work on that for next semester, for the 152-164 class, which is the Design and Implementation Projects class. All right, so start thinking about it now, because then you'll have already started on it. All right. So the next chapter that's in here is Chapter 5. Chapter 5 talks about buttons. A little bit longer a chapter, but before we go into it, let me grab this. And to me, if there is a problem with this, not with this software, but with Bootstrap, all right, I just want to show you, if there is a problem with it, if I go just to getbootstrap.com and I go out to CSS, you'll notice that one of the things that's under there is buttons. If I click on buttons, it shows me all the stuff that's underneath it, okay? So we'll talk about that in just a second, but I want to grab and open up another window here. And now if you go into components, there's some stuff on buttons too, and that's button groups and button drop-downs. So they don't have all of the documentation in the same area. Not that that's necessarily that terrible a thing. I personally wish they would have put it all together. They didn't, and that's okay. All right, one of the things they talk about in the chapter, as long as you basically set it up so that your class includes button and button default, you can set it up in any of these ways. So in other words, you can take a hyperlink. It doesn't have to be where, button class equal button or input class equal or type equal button. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So what I'm saying is if I grabbed all four of these right here, all right, and threw them into my page, they would end up looking like these. Does that make sense? So it's up to you how you want to set those up. For me, if I said, you know what, you've got to set all of them up like this because this is technically the Bootstrap way. Button, class equal, button, button default, type is, etc. Then I'm telling you that I know everything there is about this, and I don't want to do that because I don't. All right? So any of these will work. And we'll get into this in just a minute. This is the default, but there's other kinds of classes. So we're adding two classes at a minimum here, the BTN or the button class and the BTN-default class. That gives you a regular looking button, what we've been used to so far. That actually is gray, all right, with black text on it. All right, it's a light colored gray. And they mention here, again, how you can do any of that stuff, links, etc. Now, then you can come in here and you can add any of these. So again, if you just have button default, you get that. If you have primary, you get blue, success, green, all right, info, light blue, warning, that's kind of an orange, danger, red, all right? And I'm telling you this, and this should just be stuff that makes sense to you anyway. You should use that stuff in its right context. So in other words, if it's not a danger, if it's not an error situation, you shouldn't make a button red. That kind of an idea, all right? And if you need more, they give you a little bit of explanation about these, conveying meaning, etc. Then there's sizes. And you notice default, and it says default, and well, that looks bigger than these, and it looks bigger than those because if you just use the default, again, the width of the button is based on what the text is that's in there. All right? You can set it up for large, small, and extra small. All right? The advantage of doing it this way is we're not using any of our own CSS to do this. We're using the built-in CSS that comes with Bootstrap. And the advantage of doing that is if you decide that you're going to take every one of your buttons and make them a small button, let's say, and you use that for every one, you know that they're going to have the same uniform size. All right? They talk here, you can have block level buttons, as it says, those that span the full width of their parent by adding button block. All right? Probably not one you're going to use real often. Active state, buttons that appear they appear pressed with a darker background. And again, I don't think I have to say this. If I've got 3 buttons, how many of them can I give the active state to? You say, well, you can give it to all 3, but only one would have it. Yeah, that's true. All right. And you're going to see that as we start going into and taking a look at this stuff. All right. As it says, you can come in here and disable a button. All right. there's different ways that you can disable buttons too. There's a disabled attribute, but there's also a thing with opacity. All right, you know what opacity is because we talked about that last semester. It's basically, it's going to be a number between 0 and 1. Transparent to opaque type of an idea. And as they keep going down, you can make image buttons. These are a couple that are built in. All right. And I don't know if I think we've got these. I think this one is used on the last example that I give you, which I think is that example 5. There you can see that. I wasn't real innovative there. I just threw this stuff out there, but you get the idea. So if we were to go in there and grab that where we've got the image set to round, all right, whoops. If we change that, and we used rounded or thumbnail, you'd see the difference. All right. If you work with this stuff, take a look here. Then they even get into talking about some background stuff. The one thing you got to watch out for that I've noticed is you can go too nuts with color in here real easily. And if you decide that you've got a lot of buttons on a page and you're going to give them all a lot of colors, is that, typically what that's going to do then, if that's in there with text, is the person's interest is going to be focused on the buttons. And is that what you're going to want? Probably, typically, no. All right. All right. The other thing that's in here when they talk about button groups is I believe that by default there might be a pixel between buttons if you create a bunch of them in a row, but I've seen it at least at sometimes where there's nothing between them at all. So you can set up a button group and you can decide exactly how much room you want to have between each button that's in there, how many pixels you want to have in there. All right. You can create split buttons. Again, taking a look at that, hopefully that makes sense. And I believe they all have. All right. You want it to go up instead of down? That might make sense if it was on the bottom of a page, for example. So they call that a drop up rather than a drop down. And again, if you get a chance, start reading through some of the stuff that's in here. Because some of the stuff, yeah, it gives you textual explanations, but some of it gives you little hints and clues as far as what you might want to do and how you might want to do it. All right? Yeah. And they even go on. There's check boxes and radio buttons. We get to those in a later chapter, so I'm not going to hit any more on this right now. Navigation is a later chapter, too. All right. So in your book, whether you use a link or whether you use a tag on page 25, they show you different sizes on page 26. They show you that more detail on page 27. And that's it for that chapter. Like I said, I didn't think this part of it would take very long. And it isn't. All right. Then we jump up next to icons. And typically with icons, they're not referred to as icons. I think I mentioned this the other day. They're glyphicons or glyph icons, depending on the way you want to pronounce it. So if I come down to components, notice what comes up by default, the first thing that's in there, which are glyphicons. All right? So what they show you in this chapter is how you can add. These are the ones that come with Bootstrap. So what they do is, one of the first things they do is they have you take a button that says like more details, and they add an arrow to it. All right? Just to show you, just literally, it's just something you add to your line. There's not much. You just put in there. There must be, at least, I would guess, over 100 here. There are a lot of other ones that you can get, either free, online, all right? And they might even have another listing of them in here, but I don't think they do. And of course, you can build your own. All right, and you can buy tons of them too. Yes.
There is a bunch of really cool ones that are free on a website just called iconarchive.com, and they're colored, so you can get, there's really creative looking ones. There's sets that'll go together. Some of them take you to dumb links, but most of them are free.
Search through 590,918 icons. All right, bring a picnic lunch, and you can just spend a day doing it. All right. Well, thank you for that, Micah. So it's iconarchive.com. Can't read that. I try to put these in there for people who might be watching on tape. There it is. And I'm sure that's a good site, but again, I'm sure there are even other ones. So if you wanted something, let's say again you were working with sports and you wanted sports icons, you couldn't find them in here, there probably is a site available where you can get them either free or at a very reasonable cost. All right, so chapter 6 in the book starts on page 28, and it's a whopping pages 28 and 29. That's the whole chapter. All right. As it says, Bootstrap has 200 icons you can use for free. All right. And they're referred to as glyphicons, and they show you, and that's exactly where I went out to. Then they show you how you can add those. Now, if you add the example with the span tag that they show on page 28, that's an icon all by itself. And you might have a reason to want to do that. Or like with that little search thing, you might want to put that inside of a search box. That would be more like what they show here on page 29, where inside of the button, they stick the span class in there. Class equal glyphicon, glyphicon slash, then whatever the name is. That's it. All right, then finally, the last chapter that I want to go through is on chapter 7, which is on multi-column layout. And I wanted to do that one because multi-column layout and containers at least somewhat go together. So if you go in under getbootstrap.com and you go to CSS, right near the top, there's grid system. And you can see all the stuff that they have that goes along with it. All right? They give you some rules, but again, the key rule is what I mentioned to you already, that everything is based off of a size of 12. Now, one thing that we didn't go over yet, that they go over in here and they go over in the chapter, is you very well might want to use media queries or set it up so that you're going to have a different number of columns based on the device width that you have. For instance, I might set it up so on these machines right here, it's 12 columns wide. But I might set it up so that if I was using a mobile phone, it's only 1 column wide. All right? And all of that stuff is discussed in here. As it says, rows must be placed within a container or a container fluid for proper alignment and padding. Use rows to create horizontal groups of columns. Content can be placed within columns, and only columns may be intermediate children of rows. All right? And then they start showing some examples. So that would be a column, but when you work with a column, that's for an extra small device. That's what the XS is. There's XS for extra small. There's, I think it's SM for small. MED, I believe it is, for medium. There's large and there's extra large. I'm sure they're explained in here. But then they start showing this. Please take some time and read this. All right? I've said this before. I'm going to say it one more time. It's going to be several months from now, bless you. It's going to be several months from now, but come May, those of you who are in the, and I hope it's all of you, who are in the 152, 164 class, unless you've taken it already, the Design and Implementation Projects class. Last year, we were fortunate enough that 2 of the people that were here were from Foremost Media. And I'm going to try to get even more next time. I want you to come up with sites and use the stuff that blows them away. that they think, geez, we don't even have anybody at our place who's doing this. All right. I will tell you that there was, I don't know if he got the job or not, he never got back to me, but there was one person here, all right, that did a presentation that right when it was over, I got an email asking me his personal email address because they wanted to interview him for a job. All right, so it does happen. So start looking through this and look at media queries. As it says, we use the following media queries in our less file. So that's, we don't get into less until towards the end of the book. All right, but just so you see this, you can read all this stuff right here now, and that's going to make sense to all of you. All right? Large desktops. All right? Medium-sized desktops, small-sized desktops, or small devices, etc. And it's all done based on the number of pixels that you have available to you. Now you know, or hopefully you know, that by default, if you make something and you create it using Bootstrap, that it's going to be set up like this. In other words, it'll automatically be set up to go down to one column. And as you know, and you can see that if I click there, or wherever it is, all right, I guess down there, then we've got all of our menu options. And if we expand it, it comes back up. So you get all that stuff basically for free. All right? So take advantage of it is what I'm saying. There's no reason that you shouldn't take advantage of it. All right. So they show you just this chapter has got about 6 or 8 pages in it. Maybe it's, I guess it's a few more than that. But all it is example after example. So if you get some time, if nothing else, create a simple document. Throw about 10 paragraphs in it. All right, go out to lipsum.com or whatever, and then start playing with this. Now, the other thing I want to mention about that, and this won't be a surprise to any of you, but when I do this, I'm trying to simulate using a mobile device, right? Probably a mobile phone. There are mobile phone simulators out there. All right. In fact, next semester, or really this semester, those of you who are in the C class will be using the emulator that's built into the Mac. All right. And rather than an emulator, all right, there's a simulator that comes with Android, but instead of a simulator, we'll actually be using a small mobile device. All right. But you can do some checking like this, etc. Or you can use the built-in tools. And yeah, I thought that was funny because I just got an article on that. Bootstrap 4 is coming. All right, I don't even think there's a book out on it yet, but it's coming, and it sounds like it might even be here by the end of the year. I've got a note here, and I just wanted to show you this because we're basically done, but I just wanted to mention this to you. This was on page 32. I want to bring this file up. This is called PM call. All right, 4 columns. Two columns. And 2 columns. But I've got a note here that when I tried some of this stuff that you see here, when I tried some of it, it worked differently in Firefox as opposed to in Chrome. All right? And I don't know if that's the case or not. That one looks like it'd be the same. See that? So there it is right there in Firefox, and I believe the same one in Chrome doesn't have that.
Couldn't you just put a little pop-up thing maybe at the top that recognizes if somebody's in Firefox that?
Yes, but it's even easier than that. All right, and it might have been in both. But they mentioned, this is what I wanted to get to. If you turn in your book and you look on pages 36 and 37. Page 36, they're showing you here when you've got a 4-column format with just 4 paragraphs, it looks okay. All right, on that size screen at the top of the page. But then notice when you go to a medium screen, that's when you get this. All right, so they show you how to fix it on the next page. All right, and it says there something is not right. Paragraph 4, it should be at the same level as paragraph 3 and not below it. And what they mention then is the reason for that is the size of the paragraphs. All right, so this is kind of predicated on the size of the paragraph. So the author says, let's fix this problem on page 37. It says, sometimes when the columns vary in height, they do not rearrange as expected. In our case, the first paragraph is taller than the second, which creates some empty space below the second paragraph. All right. So again, that's what they show in figure 7.6. So the author mentions there on the bottom of page 38 and going up to the top of page 39, if we would like the first and second paragraph to have the same height regardless of content, we can do what Bootstrap calls a column reset. It will set the height of the whole row based on the height of the tallest member in the row. So if you put that in, as shown there on the bottom of page 38, and where it says visible, you don't put in 2 stars like they say there. You're going to put some kind of a value in there. And here they used medium. And when you turn to page 40, it's now the size you want. And I mean, your question, Michael, was a good one and it was a valid one. All I would say is when you're working with Bootstrap and something looks funky, rather than going in and starting to dig through the CSS or create your own, see if that's a known problem. It could be a device size, it could be anything. But as best you can, go into Google and key in what you think the problem is, and chances are you'll end up with a Stack Overflow or something else that's going to give you an answer to it. All right. The last thing I want to tell you is what I'm going to give you right now. If you remember from last time, we did this. Let's see. Of course, I don't have any of them open. Last time we started to go through this example. That was example 1 that had nothing in it, basically. Then we went to this example here, 2, where we started to do this, and we had some problems with it. All right. From there, we went over, and I at least showed you example 3, which is here. It's pretty much right out of the book. Example 4, which is here, and it starts to show you navigation bars. And then finally, example 5, which has got a whole site in it. All right. So this is going to be your first unofficial assignment. I'm going to give you all 5 of those files. And what I'd like you to do now, you don't have to necessarily key in all 5 of them, all right? But I'd like you to pick one, either number 3 or number 4, and write some documentation for it. In other words, look through it and try to map it up with what's on the getbootstrap.com site, and then just give me a little comment on most of the stuff that's in there. Does that make sense? You can pick the last one if you want, but it's just got a lot of stuff in it. But if you want to do that, you can do that one too. All right, so I'm going to give you handouts of all these. So they're example 1, example 2, example 3, example 4, and example 5. All right? I didn't know if this would be a great way to start, but until I go and write the specs for the first assignment that I'm going to give you, I figured this would give you something to do today. All right? So you're going to get 5 sets of handouts. The first 2 are just 1 page each. And make sure when you go and look at them, up in the title bar at the top, this one should, for all of yours, make sure it says example 01. There's the first one. It's funny, I did the same thing this morning with the baby who was sitting there. All right. At least I'm being consistent. Here's the second one, and again, it should make sure yours says example 02. And I will tell you, people who are taking this class online, you're going to have to get a hold of me. But you're going to have to get a hold of me because I'm not going to sit there and just start putting all this stuff out there electronically so you don't have to do any work on your own. And there's a few people who are in this class who are just not here today. Did you get?
I got it too.
You got number 1 and number 2?
Sorry. that's hiding
So again, pick number 3, or number 4, or number 5. You probably will want to key it in, and as you're doing it, go through the Bootstrap documentation and just put a little comment in there explaining exactly what's happening right there. Okay, there's number 2. Here's number 3. If you want to take a break, go ahead and take a break too. Numbers 4 and 5 are upstairs on my desk. I made copies, but they're up on my desk. So I'm going to grab those as soon as I end up passing these out, and I'll get you those in just a minute.
Oh, 2 pages.
Hey Jeff, I came across something this weekend. I don't know if you heard of it. Opacity. Pregnancy. You ever heard of that? It's an IDE. Does the filing for you and everything like that.
You should get a glass tomorrow. So again, I have number 4 and number 5 upstairs. Take your break. They'll be on your desks when you get back. That's an extra. Did you get? Okay. Did you get a copy of this of the 3rd one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why is it saving this?
Why is what?
It's saving